good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Welcome today to our very special online event, a joint event between Peaceboat and GPPAC, the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict. My name is Mary Joyce. I'm an international coordinator with Peaceboat and also coordinating the Northeast Asian Regional Secretariat of GPPAC. And we're really glad to have you joining us online today. We have some very special guests lined up, so we hope that you'll enjoy this hour spending with us. GPPAC, as some of you may be aware, is a global network of civil society organizations working on peace building and conflict prevention. And Peaceboat is very proud to have been a part of this network since it was launched actually exactly 15 years ago this year, and serving as the Northeast Asian Regional Secretariat since then. Today's event is taking place as part of a series that we're organizing at the moment for a Peaceboat crowdfunding campaign, which we're conducting globally. Maybe we can bring up the slide just to show about that. As some of you may be aware, Peaceboat is an organization which usually is self-funded through organizing different education and advocacy programs which take place on board global voyages on a passenger ship. Of course, given the current global circumstances of COVID-19, we're unable to organize these voyages at the moment. Therefore, in order to continue our work during this period, we've launched this online campaign, and we're really glad to have you all joining us here as part of this event. Please feel free to take a look at these websites as well for information about how you can support the campaign in other ways as well, including donations, which would be very much welcomed. So we have 4 very special guests who are joining us today. They'll be joining from Colombia by way of Spain, from Fiji in the Pacific, from the Philippines, and from here in Japan. First of all, though, we'd like to just explain a little bit about what GPPAC as a network actually is, and indeed what conflict prevention and what peace building really is in action. So we have just a very short video to show for you now, just to set the stage for today's event. Hopefully we'll be having it come up soon. In the meantime, as you will have seen in these videos, actually, Peaceboat has been involved in GPPAC since it launched 15 years ago. And here we go. This is an introduction to GPPAC.
Every day, armed conflicts lead to the loss of human lives, force people to flee their homes, and cause economic destruction. There is an urgent need for prevention, as conflicts can be resolved before they turn violent. At GPPAC, we have the expertise to develop and implement non-violent solutions. For 14 years, we have been supporting and connecting people building peace in 15 regions worldwide, with more than 200 members and 20 gender experts. The Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict, GPPAC, is a member-led network of civil society organizations, CSOs. We focus on root causes of conflict and promote a culture of peace through dialogue and mediation, peace education, and civil-military police coordination for human security. For example, in the Western Balkans, GPPAC secured a commitment from teachers, practitioners, and the Ministries of Education of Serbia and Montenegro to integrate peace education into official school curricula. In countries with a history of election-related violence, such as Kenya, Kyrgyzstan, or Fiji, GPPAC members exchange experiences. They proactively promote the responsible behavior of state actors, media, and civil society to prevent the escalation of violence. Our work is locally driven and our approach is bottom-up. This way, we offer access to the views and needs of the local population. We believe that sustainable peace can only be achieved if the solutions to conflict are defined and owned by those affected by it. Conflict causes and effects spill over national borders. Our regional networks enable us to respond to the complexities of regional conflicts. We connect the experiences of hundreds of organizations and peace practitioners worldwide to national, regional, and international levels. Peace is not achieved overnight. The prevention of conflict is a process that requires long-term and continuous commitment and investment. Prevention is possible if we work together with governments, donors, civil society, religious leaders, police, military, and businesses. Together, we can make it happen.
Thank you very much for that. I hope that's given you just a little bit of taste of what peacebuilding really means to the GPPAC network and some examples of what members are doing in their activities around the world. So now I'd like to move on and introduce you to our 4 very special guests that are joining us today. We have, as we mentioned, people joining from all different continents around the world, actually. And so I'd like to first invite Darinel Rodriguez-Torres, the Executive Director of GPPAC, to join. Good morning, Darinel. How are you doing today?
Morning, Mary. Doing great. Happy to be here.
Good, thanks. So I wonder if you could share with us just briefly, how did you first get involved with GPPAC and what's your experience been along the way?
Okay, yes, when I first got involved with GPPAC in 2008, I remember that very vividly because I didn't know much about GPPAC. I was coming more from my previous background working in governmental organizations, in the private sector with public policy consultancy. And at the time, I wanted to do a sort of career change, and an opportunity came out of GPPAC. In 2008, my son was born.
Darinel, I think we're struggling to hear you a little bit. Could you maybe just try again with the earphones?
I have the earphones on. Is that the work?
I think we're still struggling a little bit, so we might actually move on to our next speaker quickly, and then we'll come back to you again just afterwards as well.
Okay.
So sorry about that, Darinel. We'll just check your earphones, but in the meantime, I'd like to move to the Pacific, and we have Sharon Bagwan-Rolls joining us from Suva in Fiji.
Hi, Bulavinaka, Mary. Great to be here with you and all our colleagues.
So Sharon, I wonder if you could share with us a little bit about your first introduction to GPPAC and your journey with the network.
Absolutely. Well, I wasn't at the global conference, unfortunately, but the Pacific was definitely there. So we've been part of the 15 regions from the outset. I got involved from about 2006 onwards, initially playing the role of media liaison when we would organize International Day of Peace events, a little bit like you, Mary. I think that's how we probably first connected. And then as part of the initial Gender Focal Points network, as GPPAC began to develop a gender policy. So I like to think that I brought feminist action into the network, as GPPAC was very open to its commitments as a civil society peace-building network to integrate the not just the Women, Peace and Security Council resolutions, but gender equality in general. And so I've had that opportunity to work at the regional level as the regional representative, to join in the international steering group events. My first ISG was actually probably the first for Darinel as well, I believe, and where I met Gus for the first time. So it's really been an experience of connecting. I think it's one of the first things is about connections, learning and connecting across the different regions of peace builders. Obviously, we all work in our different spaces, our different civil society spaces, but to come together as the 15 regions is really has been something that I've truly treasured along the years. It's also been important for us from the Pacific Island region to be able to be part of a network where the issues that we have brought from the Pacific, which are sometimes seen as, we're so peaceful, but have been really important in terms of the conflict prevention, the human security agenda, the youth agenda, and more broadly, the gender equality and inclusion agenda has been very important. And to have the support and the learning through GPPAC, I think that was really something that saw a change in the way in which, as GPPAC Pacific, we were engaging more with regional intergovernmental processes, with the Pacific Islands Forum. We've been engaging with the United Nations, both at regional and global level. And the other point that I feel very strongly about in terms of both a personal experience, but also one I feel that we share across the 15 regions, is the sense of solidarity, especially when we face challenges and political challenges as well. Many may be aware that Fiji had, another military coup in 2006, and at the time, the organization I was with, FemLink Pacific, we were the Regional Secretariat. We took on that responsibility, and we knew that there were important learnings that we could bring from GPPAC in terms of the integration of peace building processes as part of our contribution to inclusive organizing for democracy and for peace. So for me, it's been about amplifying our issues, connecting through the regions, and obviously solidarity. And now, as the current chair of GPPAC and also the gender liaison to the International Steering Group, I feel that all sort of comes together with that opportunity to have a global vantage point, but on some very critical local issues as well. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I think you've really highlighted some of the really core principles and beliefs of GPPAC as a network, looking at this solidarity and how we can connect beyond with the local, the regional, and the global as well. Speaking of solidarity, I think someone who's really taken the lead on that within peace building here in Asia and also worldwide is Gus Miklat. So I'd like to invite him into the conversation now. Gus joining us from Mindanao in the Philippines. Gus is the Executive Director of Initiatives for International Dialogue, a Philippine-based NGO. And Gus, welcome today. And I wonder if you could share with us about how you first got involved in GPPAC.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Hola. GPPAC has been, I think, evolving for even before it was founded. I'd like to say that. So in, I think, the early 2000, the Secretary-General of the UN then, Kofi Annan, I think, challenged the civil society networks or groups to come together and create some sort of a platform or space to shift or help shift the paradigm of addressing conflicts instead of reacting to conflict into preventing conflicts. So that challenge, I think, was taken on by a lot of different groups, especially by one organization in Europe that was based in The Hague. It was the European Conflict Prevention Network, or ECCP, European Center for Conflict Prevention. And its executive director then, Paul van Tongeren, who is now GPPAC's honorary chair. I consulted, along, of course, with his colleagues in ECCP, with different networks around the world who have been working one way or the other on peace building or conflict prevention already at that time, or for a long time. And in our region, we were approached to see and the possibility of animating this network. But just a trivia, in the initial years, Northeast Asia, Peace Boat, and IID, even I think a bit of Pacific, we worked together in developing the Asia Pacific Network or something. We had a meeting here in Davao with Yoshoka, Ginny, and some other friends from Arena and the region to see and discuss this possibility of, in fact, joining this evolving network. But then while there are a lot of issues that were complementary and everything, but we saw that there were very different issues or conflict issues in our respective regions. For Northeast Asia, it was more on the Korean Peninsula. It was beyond and across boundaries of states. But in the Southeast Asia context, it was more about internal conflicts or ethnic conflicts or those types of conflicts. And so Yoshoka and I, we settled for an amicable divorce. We separated. Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia went their respective ways and established our respective GPPAC networks in the region. And so, but that was even before GPPAC was officially founded. And so after a series of consultations and discussions, including, of course, our consultation with our own networks locally, nationally, and even in the region, as IID is based in Mindanao, but we are a regional advocacy organization, although we're all Filipino at this point, decided to participate in the continuing evolution of this network. So in 2005, officially, among other 1,000 or so people, converged in the United Nations headquarters in New York and founded GPPAC officially. So that's
I wonder if we can show a photograph from the UN headquarters when we had the launch of GPPAC. I think we had an image of it before. Maybe we'll see if we can get that up and
great,
meet you and Yoshioka before or around the time of your amicable divorce, shall we say.
Yeah, I think it was one, if not the first, civil society gathering that happened inside the General Assembly headquarters of the UN. So it's a milestone, and it's a very defining moment in the annals of both civil society in general and peace building in particular.
Indeed. This was in July 2005, and Peaceboat's 49th voyage actually docked in New York right at the time. Yeah. So on the stage here, this is actually Peaceboat voyage participants who had been rehearsing the drums on board and then performing.
The energy at that time was so kinetic.
Yeah, and I think we can see you on the side of the stage here, and with Yoshioka speaking at the opening as well.
Our hands at the back of we were like a Boy Scouts, me and listening to Yoshoka.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, really, those beginning days of GPPAC. And I think we'll have a chance to hear more about how Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia have continued to collaborate, even despite the split, seeing how that we can complement and support the work in solidarity with what's going on in different parts of the region. So thanks, guys, and we'll come back to you again very soon. And now we'd like to introduce our next speaker for today, who is Moe Sasaki, who is joining us from not too far away from me, from also here in Japan. And Moe, I wonder if you could introduce yourself quickly and about how you first got involved in this network.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. My name is Moe Sasaki. Currently, I work for an international development consulting company called ICNet, which is based in Japan. And inside it, I do work in training, especially in the field of peace building. And focusing on really training everyday individuals who are passionate about peace building and trying to empower citizens to be a part of this change. Yes. Sorry, Mary.
Yeah, so Moe, it's been a real pleasure to be working with you over these past few years. And I think we'll have a chance to hear more about the different great work that you're doing here in Northeast Asia, and particularly with young people in the region as well. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
So now we'll see if we can go back to Darrenelle. Hopefully we've got the sound issues worked out now. So Darrenelle, welcome again. Yes, much clearer.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can. So Darrenelle, maybe we'll just have you, if you can introduce yourself a little bit, and then maybe we can jump into the program for today as well. You, of course, are from Colombia originally, but working as the executive director of GPPAC, a global network. So I wonder if you could also share a little bit how you see the role of networking within peace building, and how you see how Peaceboat and GPPAC have been collaborating in that respect.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, no, indeed. And maybe going back to my previous question, as just two things, because there were two highlights for me when I started in GPPAC. One was, of course, that when I started in GPPAC was when I remember very vividly, because I had my interview to join the GPPAC network, the GPPAC Global Secretariat, precisely the day my son was born.
Oh, so wow. I never realized
that will be 12 years exactly. So we had to postpone the interview because I was in the hospital. So those, of course. And then, as Sharon was saying, the ISG in Davao was something that really got me hooked in GPPAC. That was my first international steering group meeting, my first contact with the network. And to see, I missed the 2005 conference, but to see the energy that was part of this network, the solidarity, the sense of purpose was really motivating. And it was hosted by Gas right here. Going back to the question about the value of peace building and networking on peace building. No? When we talk about peace building, I like to think that we're talking essentially about two things, or two things come to my mind. One, I would say negative, and one more positive. No? To me, the negative of peace building is fear. You know? And and peace building is about countering fear and developing relationships of trust. So the opposite of fear is building that trust. And I think networking is an essential component in that work of building trust, because it enables us to not only meet, but to understand, to interact with those people that we previously feared, or that we previously had some misconceptions, or that we were not able to relate to the way they think. So networking, bringing people together, helps in this work of building trust. Next, peace building is about then building these relationships of trust and peace and collaboration. So this function of networking on building collaboration among civil society organizations working for peace is something that has been critical in the work of GPPAC. It's something that GPPAC does, that is at the core of the DNA of GPPAC, but also building these collaborations with other actors that are not necessarily civil society organizations, political actors, businesses, the military, all of those actors, and basically saying, hey, there is something that we can do together, what it is that we can do from our respective roles, and how can we push together towards a solution to a problem. So I think that's the importance of networking for peace building. Is a more broader approach. It is how can we build these relationships of working together, of collaborating on developing something, on actually building something together.
Yeah, very much. I think that's, as you've mentioned, really at the core of what we're doing. And I think as Peaceboat's role coordinating the Northeast Asia network of GPPAC, which is a region where there are so many still high tensions, mistrust, fear of the other, and this sort of situation. So being able to work with you from the global perspective and bringing those kind of voices and experiences to the work that we're doing here regionally has been really valuable for us as well.
And I think that's what makes Peaceboat such a special organization, because they take this approach of really challenging perceptions into, well, let's make it an experience. No, let's actually bring people there to those places so people can get together, interact, learn what is happening, and challenge these assumptions by actually creating an experience of living, of sharing, of really experiencing what this unitedness or sense of unity is there. And that's, I think, a great contribution that Peaceboat does through its global voyage, of course, but of course also through all the lines of work that Peaceboat is developing.
Thank you. Maybe just to put some faces to this work as well, I think we have a couple of photographs here if you'd like to share about some of the work I think we have in Colombia, but also your involvement in Northeast Asia as well.
Yeah, no, this is, I like to, I always make the point that our conversations are very important, because conversations is the way in which we create our reality, really. No, it's the way that we talk about somebody, the way that we refer of some issue is what shapes our reality. This is a project that we had in Colombia, which was called Intergenerational Dialogues for Peace, where essentially what we were doing was creating spaces for people in small towns very much affected by violence, that were still affected by violence after 50 years of conflict in Colombia, simply to have conversations and to think, okay, how do you see the future going? How can we build future? So that was a very interesting project. And similar, although at a different scale, is not the project in Northeast Asia. It's like, how can we create spaces for conversation? Simply bringing people together and say, okay, how do you see this issue? How can we develop a joint understanding of a particular issue? And I think, I'm very happy that GPPAC has been able to support this process in the Korean Peninsula and be one of the very few organizations that actually have members across all the region, and bringing members from North Korea, from South Korea, from China, from Japan, to have these conversations, to develop a joint understanding of a problem and to think together, how can we work together to improve things. And I'm very grateful to Peaceboat for for also involving us in GPPAC, the Global Secretariat, and working through us to support this process. And we hope to continue doing that in the future.
I'm sure we will. And as you mentioned, this process is something which is really only made possible because of the global support of a network like GPPAC, which makes what local peace builders are on the ground are doing really possible in a way. So thanks so much for your support and ongoing involvement in that as well. So we'll come back again to Darnell a little bit later, but let's move once again to the Philippines. As Gus mentioned, we have a long history of cooperation between the work that's going on with the Southeast Asia members of GPPAC and here in Northeast Asia. So Gus, I wonder if you could share with us a little bit about how you see the importance of this kind of regional cooperation and solidarity. And also, I know that your organization IID, but also GPPAC Southeast Asia has utilized Peaceboat and our voyages as a safe space for dialogue as well. I wonder if you can share some of your personal experiences of that on board. It looks like we're just having a little bit of trouble getting Gus to come in. We'll just give it a moment and see. Here he is. Gus, did you hear the question just then?
I think I got a tail of it.
So just if you could share with us about your experiences of regional cooperation and solidarity from the view in Southeast Asia.
Yes, definitely. As solidarity is a dear word to us in IID, as we were established as initially as a solidarity organization. And we are 32 years old. We've developed campaigns and projects in solidarity with a lot of other so-called South peoples, not only in the region, but even beyond the region. When we were initially very ambitious when we started. We wanted to change the world, so to speak, especially after the afterglow of ousting a dictatorship in our country, which was the Marcos dictatorship in 1986. So that was when we were established as IID. And we felt that it was time to give back to the world the lessons that we've learned and the lessons that we have to unlearn, especially with those who were still struggling at that time. And so we wanted to share this experiences to friends in South Africa, Southern Africa, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Sri Lanka, all over. But it happened to be, well, obviously it became very impractical to do so, especially at that time without this kind of technology yet. We were doing this face-to-face. We were like sending and accepting interns from all over for 3 to 6 months, etc. So in preparing one internship program for 1 or 2 people, it will take half a year to 1 year to prepare. So that fell through after a few years, and so we decided to focus in Asia, finally in Southeast Asia, and even specifically to certain countries that was also still struggling for self-determination, essentially or primarily, and for democracy. In particular, Burma, East Timor, Aceh, Indonesia at the time, etc. And so that was the frame that we had, south to south, people to people solidarity. And as we brought this in the GPPAC network, this solidarity lens. And so when we transformed or evolved from a solidarity organization into a peace-building organization, this was what we brought into the network. If Sharon brought in gender and feminism into GPPAC, I think I already brought in strongly the lens and the frame of solidarity with and among the network. So with you, for example, Peaceboat and IID, we've been working and cooperating in some projects and in some activities. In 2018, for example, in May, we had on board the Peaceboat, we had a workshop and a session on interracial, interreligious dialogue.
I think we have a photograph of that. Maybe you can go forward a couple of pictures here.
Yeah. Well, these photos that you are saying, that you are showing, were photos of the Asia Pacific caucus of GPPAC networks. We had that too before within GPPAC, like the Pacific GPPAC, South Asia GPAC, Southeast Asia GPAC, and Northeast Asia GPAC, we had some sort of a caucus within the whole GPAC network. We were not building a faction within GPAC, but we were just trying to see and develop and evolve certain joint analysis of things and even joint activities. What you previously saw.
This photograph here is the one that you were mentioning.
This is the one that I was mentioning about this interracial and interreligious dialogue among civil society leaders in the different conflict areas in Southeast Asia, including some academics, and even we even had resource person from the ASEAN officialdom itself, specifically from the ASEAN Intergovernmental Human Rights Commission. This we discussed the different issues of interreligious discrimination or intolerance, ethnic conflicts, and how do we as civil society and peoples mitigate these issues and partner with other entities, including government or regional organizations like the ASEAN, in our case, to help address these issues. We had a particular focus on the Rohingya issue, because in 2018, this was a couple of months just after this crisis exploded in Burma, Myanmar, when we all know that almost 1 million Rohingya had to flee the Rohingya region, state, into Bangladesh, which the United Nations itself almost described as it was a virtual genocide. So we had this discussion among and between Kachin, Shan, Rohingyas, Muslims or Bajaus from Mindanao, Shan. We even had someone from Patani in South Thailand, in Aceh, etc. Of course, with partners also in the regional organizations. So Peace Boat was a space, and a safe space, which hosted us. So as we were sailing from Singapore to Thailand, we were amidst the currents and the waves. These issues were tackled by us, and we tried to come up with joint, with common understanding and analysis of our respective issues. And of course, as always, to find out in the context of solidarity also, this is when you mirror each other's issues. When you mirror each other's issues, you get to appreciate your own issue even more when you see yours in the other. So when we do this kind of work, this solidarity work, you don't only think global and act local. You think and act both locally and globally. And in fact, when you do mirror each other's issues and accompany each other's with this in this way, you actually rediscover yourselves also. You know, when you rediscover your own capacities, your own limitations, and your own energies, and you also rediscover the celebrations that you have to do among yourselves, and even together with your cohorts in other contexts that are similar.
I think that's something really at the heart of Peace Boat's voyages, and we're doing, and how to make those connections between people, and how that then reflects back on your own reality, your own situation, and your own potential for taking action as well. And as you've mentioned, also how we can look at building those connections and that solidarity, but also providing this safe space on board. So this is one of the ways that Peace Boat utilizes its journeys and its voyages at sea, not only for, of course, the different programs that happen for those people that are joining the full programs, but to provide this, safe, open space. It's at sea. It's not belonging to any particular territory. It's away from your everyday realities and difficulties within your usual circumstances. So a way to sort of look at conflicts and look at issues and look at innovative ways to approach some of these different things as well. So thanks so much for sharing that, Gus. We will come back to you again in a little bit, but we will keep moving across the ocean now, and we will move next to the Pacific. Of course, for Peaceboat as an organization, we are working not only on peace-related issues, but also on climate, on sustainability, on education programs, and also on humanitarian-related issues as well. And this is something which are all key issues for the Pacific region. So I'll welcome back Sharon. And of course, the Pacific is where there's also this critical nexus between peace building and the climate and humanitarian issues as well. I wonder if you could share some of the perspective from the work that you've been doing and of the regional network there from the Pacific Islands.
Sure, Mary. And as you've seen through the Peaceboat journey several times into the Pacific, we're a blue Pacific continent. We have many islands, 22 Pacific Island countries and territories. And what I guess does connect us right now amidst the issues of the nuclear-free independent Pacific movement, the sustaining peace agenda, the humanitarian crises such as COVID-19, but other health crises as well, and intensifying disasters, is this climate crisis, or what I'd like to sort of frame as climate security, but from a very non-militarized perspective. And that really is the context and the challenge for peace building, because I feel for a long time, when it's come to climate change or when it comes to addressing climate crisis, it has been seen from a very scientific or technical perspective, and we haven't really brought in the peace building or the human security agenda as much. Now, of course, Pacific Forum leaders several years ago have adopted the BOE Declaration, which looks at many different challenges, including climate change and human security. But these challenges don't come as a surprise, or didn't come to us as a surprise, particularly in the current context of COVID-19, because back in 2015, after the Category 5 storm in Vanuatu, which had just joined our GPPAC Pacific network, we worked very hard as part of the global study on UNSCR 1325 to bring visibility to environmental security in the Pacific. And we managed to get some very important words, which I guess was a little bit innovative in that time: climate change and health pandemic. And that is reflected in a specific Security Council resolution on women, peace and security 2242 that talks about these trajectories of conflicts and presents to the Security Council Pacific realities in terms of a human security agenda. Our regional network has recently contributed to the peace-building architecture conversation, and gender, climate, and peace in the Pacific are clearly the priorities for the region right now, whether we're looking at it as women first responders, as part of a broader Shifting the Power coalition across 13 women-led organizations in 6 Pacific countries, or whether it's the work of the Pacific Conference of Churches in bringing together the churches of the Pacific and other faith leaders, or whether it's peace builders working together to help communities really understand and prepare to look at what displacement looks like. What does it mean to lose your land, lose your place of birth, lose your place of tradition as a result of rising sea levels? So this has been part of this triple nexus approach, because we can see that it's not about climate change or development or COVID-19. It's these lived experiences that we have in our region. And we're getting information through the GPPAC network, which is, once again, the value of having a network where there are different approaches to peace building taking place in many different political situations, and also in terms of reflecting the diversity of peace building as well. So we're seeing the human security assessments which have taken place, particularly following the outbreak of COVID-19. We're seeing an increase in food security programs because communities need to be supported as a result of the lockdowns. Our island communities are having to look at both how to grow food, but also how to prepare in terms of adapting to these changes. We're seeing the use also of innovative information and communication as well, because as both Gus and Darrenelle have said, building trust, having dialogue, having conversations are so important. And now more than ever, when we are even more isolated, there is a need to look at how can we bring peace building into some of these innovative ways. So I guess for us, it is about the triple nexus. It is about getting intergovernmental organizations, getting the United Nations to really look at it from the perspective of the lives of Pacific people, of people in other regions as well. It's not just a Pacific crisis or climate security priority. It's one that requires greater attention to, for me, peace building being the anchor in terms of the responses, whether it's a development issue or whether it's a humanitarian crisis. So for me right now, we're looking at the Pacific, from the Pacific perspective is, yes, we do have a climate crisis. Yes, we need to address climate security, but we don't need a militarized response. We need an inclusive response. We need a response where all stakeholders are sitting at the table together. And that includes young people, that includes women of all diversities, that includes our faith leaders, and that also includes our traditional leaders, as well as our political leaders. And that is the approach we're taking right now in the Pacific to bring these voices into the different intergovernmental processes, because these are the voices that matter, and that's a responsibility that we have as a network. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks so much, Sharon. And I think these issues that you've really raised is something where the Pacific is taking such a lead as well. You know, in times when we were relying on these, large conferences where people would get together in person, of course, the different geographical issues, the difficulties of bringing people from the Pacific and making sure that their voices were heard in these platforms is something that's always a challenge. But actually, maybe one of the things that we're seeing now in these current challenging circumstances is that actually these voices of people from the Pacific who have been working on these, recognizing the nexus with humanitarian issues, with climate issues, and how this is all connected, is actually coming forward in a really, really strong way now, I think. You mentioned also the role of youth. So in that note, I think I'll keep moving on and I'll introduce our next speaker. So we'll come back to Moye. We'll come back to you again soon, Sharon. Thanks very much. So Moye Sasaki, Moye first joined Peaceboat actually 7 years ago now, I think it was, Moye, back in 2013. I had the pleasure of traveling with you at that time during a Northeast Asia Youth Peace Dialogue that we organized on board the ship. It's hard to believe it's been that long since then, but at the same time, it feels like so much has happened in the years since. But I wonder if you could share maybe a little bit of your own personal experience and how your journey as a peace builder started from there.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, so my first introduction to both GPPAC and NARPI and Peaceboat was through this Northeast Asia Youth Dialogue that I was that I joined as a guest in 2013. And this was a program where youth from Japan, China, Korea, Hong Kong all came together on the boat. And we really talked about some difficult issues, historical conflicts that are oftentimes a little bit difficult and sensitive to talk about, but we were able to do that on the international waters. And really, Peaceboat did a wonderful job of creating that safe space where we could not only interact with each other, but have the opportunity to share with the people who are also on the boat as guests. Here are just some photos of that time. Could you go back a little one? Yeah. So kind of just as a personal experience of that time 7 years ago, there's a photo of an elderly man there with a Korean young lady. And I just want to share this short story because it really kind of encapsulates my experience and kind of what has driven me into the peace building field. So this time on the boat, my first time on the boat, it was just 5 days, but it really showed me the power of dialogue. And so this young lady who worked to advocate the issues of comfort women, she was sharing about the issue and her work in it as youth. And we were sharing it with other Japanese passengers who were on the boat. And usually they're a little bit on the older age range. And this old gentleman here who joined actually experienced sending his older brother to the Korean War. He's a Japanese gentleman, and he, after hearing our sharing of what we do as youth in the region, he stood up and started sharing about his story. And after that, we were shocked about how open he was about sharing his personal story and his kind of hurt. But as we listened to his story, he shared about how although he had to send his old brother to the war, his brother was actually able to come back from the war healthily. But the fact is that when he was returning on a boat, the boat actually sank. And the only reason that he was able to come back safely to Japan was because a Korean fishing boat picked him up and brought him safely back to Japan. And this was right at the time when the war had ended. So, there could have been many other possibilities of what could have happened. But in fact, it was this kind of human-to-human relationship, despite what was happening internationally, that really saved his older brother. And there was this kind of sharing with tears. And this was actually the first time that I had the opportunity to translate between this Japanese old man and this Korean youth. And that kind of was a very empowering experience for me, kind of giving me a very direct kind of example of the role that perhaps I have in this work between Northeast Asian peace and just peace building in general. And if you could go to the next slide, this kind of led me into wanting to get more involved in Peaceboat. And so after 2013, I joined Peaceboat as an interpreter, a communication coordinator, and actually traveled the whole voyage, really kind of wanting to re-experience that dialogue and the role I might have in bringing about this dialogue and bringing about real connections despite differences in nationality or differences in age. And it really stuck with me. And actually, Peaceboat was the first place that I was actually able to kind of practice facilitating these kind of peace building workshops. And since then, if you could go to the next slide, I really kind of kept this essence of the power of individuals coming together and sharing about issues such as demilitarization or the issue of Zainichi Koreans in Japan, or just daily social violences that we experience in our society. And because I experienced this importance of intergenerational dialogue on Peaceboat, this is something that I've been trying to keep in the peace building trainings that I have been organizing through ICNet. So sometimes we will have participants who are in their 70s, while also having participants who are in their teenage years. And this dialogue has been really empowering for both sides and really eye-opening. If you could go to the next slide as well. One of the things that have kind of stuck to me in the last few years has been also connecting kind of peace building work throughout the world. I actually have a background growing up in Africa, and especially in Rwanda, and I've grown up learning about the reconciliation work happening there at the grassroots level and the reconciliation work that individuals are doing in their own communities. And this has really been the kind of understanding of, or it's what led me to understand that people do have the power to change their own lives and create peace in their own communities. And I've always wanted to bring these two kind of worlds together, the peace building work that's been happening in Rwanda since the genocide and the peace building work that people in Japan and Asia have been doing. And last summer, I was able to bring a group of about 18 people. Many of them were past Peaceboat participants. And we all traveled to Rwanda and really learned about the reconciliation work that's been happening there and had workshops together to discuss about what peace is and our vision for what we want peace to be from a citizen's perspective. And having that, again, intergenerational, intercultural dialogue has been something that has stuck with us, I think, each of us. And I hope to continue creating these kind of spaces in the future.
Thanks. And I think one more, yeah.
This is actually something that I have been kind of challenging myself recently with. I have always been very grassroots focused, very like citizen focused, and have been avoiding issues that are more national level or international level. But I have been having the opportunity through kind of networks that have been built through Peaceboat, and have had the opportunities to speak at places like the Ulaanbaatar Dialogue on Northeast Asian security, and have been working with places like the UN Department for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, and Peacebuilding Affairs, to share about youth perspectives on what we want as Northeast Asian youth for peace and security. And I think what has been really important and what has kind of stuck with me since Peaceboat is that because I am youth and because I've been working and learning from everyday citizens, I have the ability to, in a sense, speak of what we want. I don't have to carry the burden of a whole nation. I don't have to carry the whole burden of all the political difficulties that maybe some of the decision makers have to carry in these conferences. So being able to really just speak freely in these spaces, I think has encouraged heartfelt dialogue, even in conferences where a lot of people just speak from a ready-made paper. And I think each of the youth here, we had youth from Mongolia, China, Korea, join, and Japan, yes. And this has been something that I've been challenging myself, how to connect the voices of citizens and youth to a more wider and upper level decision-making platform. Still something I'm trying to figure out, but it's definitely something that's exciting.
Indeed, I think that's something that we're all, even on a personal level, but also GPPAC as a network, still trying to figure out as well, and how we can really bring, as you're saying, these important youth voices, these important personal perspectives, but then also ensure that that can really be connecting the grassroots and what's happening on the political level at the same time. So thanks so much for sharing your journey with us, Maya. And we're really glad to be able to travel together with you still into the future as well. Mm-hmm. So we have just under 10 minutes left. So I think we will invite all of our speakers back in now. So we'll welcome back again Darrenelle, Sharon, Gus, and Moya. We'll have a bit of a busy screen going on. And in the last 10 minutes, I'd like to see if we can just have a bit of a conversation with you all about some of the different issues that have been raised today. I think Sharon has mentioned about, for example, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on peace building, how we're looking at continuing solidarity, continuing network, and what role peace builders have within this context as well. So maybe I'll do a quick round and we can ask each of you in sort of a minute or so each to share what you see as the role of peace builders as we're looking perhaps beyond this current pandemic. Of course, we're all, Peaceboat, no exclusion, in very challenging circumstances at the moment. But to see how do we look beyond this, and how do we envision what kind of a world do we want to come out on the other side of this pandemic? Maybe Darrenelle, I can come to you first.
Yes, thanks, Mary. I think one thing this pandemic is bringing several challenges that the abilities of peace builders will be needed. There is a lot of talk. There is a lot of fear to begin with. And remember, I started my intervention with that. So there's a lot of fear. There is a lot of, I would say, selfishness somehow, thinking, okay, we'll get the solution for ourselves, and we'll need to get it first. There is a lot of mistrust, and I think that's where peace builders need to come. We need to come into a bit of a more holistic way. And saying, okay, we will not come out of this crisis by our own. One country will come out of this crisis by their own. The solution to the crisis is cooperation. How can we foster cooperation? And cooperation is not only, and then peace building is not only about, what peace building versus, human rights, or versus economics, or versus security. Peace building is embedded in all. So I think one thing is that we have to say, businesses, and how to do better businesses, and how to increment transactions, and how to come out economically of that economics is peace building. How can we incorporate a peace building dimension to the economic recovery that we will need to start going after the crisis? How can we incorporate a peace building lens into healthcare? How can we take care of each other as a global community? How can we incorporate a peace building lens into security, the broader sense? Or how can we work together to feel more secure? So peace building is not an island. Peace building is part of every single aspect of life that we will need to take forward to overcome this challenge and to really go into the road of recovery. And I think that's something that we need to show. That's the case that we need to bring. That's the narrative that we as peace builders need to bring to counter those other narratives that are talking about, fear, suspiciousness of the other, me first, etc. So I think that will be a role of peace builders ahead in the coming years.
Very much so. There's a lot to be done for sure. Gus, how about you?
Oh yeah, I think with the pandemic, there's been two poles that's emerged. One is the more authoritarian and tyrannical pole in addressing the pandemic, and the other is the more egalitarian and democratic process. And I'd like to believe that all of us, of course, are in the latter. And the irony of not meeting face-to-face now for a couple of months is that us being able to tap into this technology and social media platforms to become more linked, even more than before the pandemic. The situation has, in fact, provided, I think, the opportunity to consolidate our networks like what we're doing right now. We have been using this technology before, but only when necessary before the pandemic. Today, we are maximizing it to the hilt. So connectivity online, such as this activity, must be sustained even beyond this pandemic, because this gives us the opportunity to also be kept abreast of each other's issues, concerns, challenges, plans, and actions. And we are able to identify what areas we can converge on, or where and how we can complement or support each other. We share what is working, what has not, or what has not, so others in our networks may learn. So we develop common and mutual undertakings from the sheer sharing of stories or catching up even on the personal level, to pitching to each other ideas, analysis, and plans for the future. So this is the context of not the new normal, but a better normal. As peace builders, it's our unique role to bridge. And this is a time to regroup. We analyze collectively, we collect our experiences, we link communities and our partners to policymakers, and vice versa. We amplify, we articulate or enhance their voices. We explore and create ways and platforms like this for dialogue and opportunities for asserting what we need to assert, to initiate dialogues. And we have a term here in our IID. We coined past forward. Instead of fast forward, the past we bring into forward. So Peace Boat and GPPAC needs to continue to sail even while the boat or the ship is grounded. We need to combine our resources, our capacities, our networks with GPPAC's 15 regions around the world, so that both of us can continue to reach out and link our respective unique and common activities and services, not only to the peoples of the world that we serve, especially to the youth and the elders. I don't know where we belong there, the youth or the elders. We need to bridge and weave. We need to bridge and weave the lessons from the old with the dynamism of the present and the hope of the future. So, yeah. So at the end of the day, we need to do all of this and be in solidarity with each other. Just as a last note, maybe to say, I had my own personal and remarkable experience in Peace Boat during the 58th voyage. I was invited as a resource person to share stories and advocacies on peace about Mindanao and Southeast Asia. It was a space, indeed, an opportunity to share our stories and perhaps reach a listening ear, touch a helping hand, prick a conscience or two, or even perhaps warm some hearts. And this developed understanding, awareness, and built relationships that have been lasting till this day. So it was a moment that is equivalent to a lifetime. So sail on, peaceful. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Gus. And I think, as you're saying, for organizations like Peaceboat and IID that have really based their work on these human connections and, you know, in-person solidarity and so on, it's a huge shift at the moment, really looking at how we move in this new era and these new times that we're seeing. But we're really looking forward to the exciting opportunities that are going to be coming out as we continue to sail, whether physically on board the ship or in other ways with you into the coming days as well. So we'll come again to Sharon, and if we can have your thoughts on this too.
Thanks, Mary. I'd rather challenge the notion of building back better, because I think that this is a time to be transformative. So for me, it's about building back equally, building back peacefully, and building back with safety and protection. And that now more than ever, there is a need to reach the unreachable with innovation, with the use of appropriate, accessible information communication technology. And I say this because as a Pacific Island region, you know, the infrastructure is one of our biggest challenges in trying to communicate. And obviously, in a country like Papua New Guinea, when you have 800 local languages, you've got to find ways to communicate between different provinces, let alone different countries. So for me, I think the fact that as peace builders, we do work in crisis situations. As much as we work harder in the prevention field, I think this is another challenge, because as Darrenelle says, we are seeing the emergence of some critical socioeconomic issues. We're seeing the impact in terms of rising poverty. We're seeing that the issue that young people are wondering what is their future when you have countries that are shut down. And for our region, when we have such a huge reliance on the tourism sector, like the Peace Boat, where do we go? Where do we go? What do we do? So I think we have a clear voice to continue to call for a human security approach. I am very concerned. I've said it a couple of times. I don't like this nuance of, you know, the war against COVID, because it really, once again, brings a militarized voice rather than how do we build safe, secure communities and families. Conflict prevention analysis is vital in the social economic recovery for the medium and long term. And I think we also have this opportunity now more than ever to strengthen alliances across civil society networks, possibly in a way that we haven't thought about before. And one of the things that I've been very proud of in terms of the innovation that's come out of GPPAC most recently are our peace podcasts. And I have this like crazy notion that we could have this sort of like peace building internet radio with people from 15 regions talking to each other and taking over the airwaves, because quite often what actually fuels conflict is the lack of information. What actually fuels conflict is the fact that only one or two voices of the most powerful get heard. And I think now, in this current stage of where we are as a global community, we really need to think about redesigning the way in which we approach things. And so I think once again, now more than ever, the peace development humanitarian nexus must be unpacked more. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks so much, Sharon. And I think, you know, as you've said, where we have a very short conversation here today, maybe just 1 hour together, but looking at how we can continue these conversations, continue to be reaching different people, including different people, to continue this dialogue in different ways. And also one thing that, you know, Sharon's always mentioning, that we're not talking about looking at a seat at the table, we're looking at how we redesign the whole table. And I think COVID is really an opportunity when everybody is forced to look at these questions in a very direct way. So we're looking forward to continuing to work with, of course, you in the Pacific and the broader GPPAC network in doing so as well. And Moe, if we could come to you for a final comment about how you see the role of peace building, whether it's from the youth perspective, from some of your own activities that you're doing, or from a broader sense to end off today. Thanks.
Thank you. Kind of going on what Sharon just said, I really think that it's, you know, having these kind of conflicts or times of difficulty is something that we cannot necessarily avoid, but it's definitely a chance for us to really look at the whole structure of what we've been put in. having this pandemic has allowed us to see which parts are really suffering, things that we usually don't have to look at because things seem to be moving smoothly, but times of conflict and times of pandemics such as this really makes us rethink about the whole structure. And I think from a youth perspective, I think people are starting to realize the importance of youth, especially since we are often the ones with the knowledge of how to use technology or how to spread this kind of information to a wider audience. And I hope that this is a really good chance for youth to really raise their voices, to kind of shine a light on issues in peace building that are often not caught unless it's talked about by youth. There's more awareness that youth are the people who are really moving forward peace in communities in a oftentimes unpaid situation, but they are kind of the glue of the community. And I hope that this is a time where youth peace builders are able to really enhance their work and get recognized and be more empowered, both financially, but also through networks. And also from kind of a perspective of intervention, I think this has really made us realize that we need to empower people more locally as well. I think a lot of working in an international consulting company, we are not able to go to the places that we used to be able to help in development and peace building. But I think this has made us realize that it's time for people like myself, in a sense, to step back and really give power to the people who already have the abilities to bring about change, and really trust that individuals are able to create change in their own communities. So just although it is a time of difficulty, I think that it's also a time of great change and opportunity, and it's really pushing us to challenge ourselves and to encourage each other to create change. And so I try to stay optimistic and encourage people, like through opportunities such as this, to share each other's work.
Very much so. I think they're all such important points, and I think there's a lot more to unpack and to continue to discuss and continue to move forward. So I hope this maybe won't be the last of such online conversations we can share together. Sharon's mentioned GPPAC's podcast, but maybe we can also look at moving in and continuing these kind of conversations going into the future as well. So thank you so much to all four of our guests today, to Darrenelle, Gus, Sharon, and Moy. We'll leave you here, but thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to hopefully sailing again together with you on board Peace Boat, and also in the work that we're doing together as part of the GPPAC network as well. Thank you to all our four guests. So as we've heard today, of course, Peace Boat is working with peacebuilders. Thanks, Sharon. Around the world, both in terms of offering space on board our voyages for dialogue, for safe meetings, for trainings, for awareness raising, and for advocacy purposes, but also continuing different work, whether it's on the ground here in Japan and Northeast Asia, working together with partners at the United Nations and other aspects as well. So in order to continue doing this, of course, we need to be moving forward and having support in a way during this period when our voyages are not able to operate. As you can see on the screen here, we have both a GoFundMe crowdfunding site which has been set up, or you can also directly donate to us through our Facebook page as well. So please feel free to, of course, have a look at this to see how you can support, but also to keep up to date on all of the different upcoming activities by Peace Boat and the GPPAC network as well. There's many different online programs and so on that will be coming. And one of these, which is coming up very soon, actually, we'd like to just introduce quickly our next event online. We have many more events which will be coming up throughout the rest of August as part of this campaign. And coming up tomorrow, if you're in the United States, on August 30th at 8 p.m. in New York, or if you're here in Japan, it will be at 9 a.m. on Friday. We will be having an event called Making Peace with the Oceans, sharing inspiring stories for climate action and ocean conservation. So we encourage you to follow both Peace Boat and GPPAC on social media. Join us in these online conversations as we're moving forward, and we hope to continue to sail together with you for more peace building in the time to come as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.